Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Cringy Movie Collection Podcast.
It's my turn today. Haha.
You always are so adversarial about this.
I just like that every 4 movies I get a pick. It's my turn. I like sharing things. I like
Yeah,
sharing
but you like to
things
do
with
it
you.
in like this kind of like, haha. Like,
Also because I think that since most of the people that listen to this podcast are your friends and relatives, they might enjoy the same movies that you do, and now this time they have to sit through my pick.
but the conceit of this podcast isn't even that I like the movies that are in the collection. To remind people what this is, I obviously, grew up at some point, and that was in the 2000s. And I got a lot of DVDs at that time, and amassed a big collection of movies. And those movies I still have them, most of them anyway, in a big DVD collection. And now that I'm in my 30s, my girlfriend and I were watching all these terrible 2000s movies and discussing them on the podcast. So, like, it's not like, I love all of these movies. Like, a lot of these, I think, aren't particularly good.
Okay.
So, it's not,
So
I suffer too.
It's my time to cringe. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm just excited to cringe.
Well, we do cringe a lot. We're talking about the Blues Brothers for 1980.
Yeah, this time we're barely out of the 70s, people. We made it.
Yes, there's a running gag on the Cringy Movie Collection podcast that all the movies that Ludovica brings to the table are movies that are about the 70s or from the 70s or somehow have the number 70 in them. Yes, this is the movie directed by John Landis with John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, right off of their SNL fame. And why don't you tell us why this movie is in your collection? I assume it's a VHS at the time.
No, it actually had a DVD because was quite a history. I watched it in high school, but kind of like the third or fourth year of high school. I saw my best friend in middle school and high school. I had the poster on his wall, and I kept like being reminded that this movie existed, but I
Okay.
was never really into it because I watch Animal House, and I really
This
did
is another
not.
John Belushi movie.
It's like the movie that made John Belushi nationwide famous, not just for people that watch SNL, but just
Yeah.
for like the general public. And I really did not like it. So I was like, oh, it must not be good. But then I was in high school, and I still only had one friend. I wanted to make more friends.
Sad story of how Blues Brothers got into your collection.
So I was doing.
Do you have more than one friend now?
Yes, I have two.
Okay,
They're
good.
both here.
Okay, it's the cat and I?
Yes.
Nice.
But anyway, I used to do fencing very pretty competitively, and I went to boot camps at the beginning of the season. And my first day, my first boot camps, there were these two guys that I really, really, really wanted to be friends with, and I thought that they were super, super cool, and they were so much into the Blues Brothers, so much so that there's like nicknames for each other were Jake and Elwood. I was just like, oh my gosh, I so much want to be
God.
friends with them.
This is you trying to impress people, going like, this
No,
is a good
actually,
movie.
not really. I think that they thought that I was very lame and they mocked me all the time.
So you got the movie because they kept talking about it?
They kept talking about it, and they were like very cool people. So when I went home, and one day I was at the movie store and I saw the DVD of the Blues Brothers, and I was like, let's watch it.
Okay.
And I actually liked it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Our English teacher in ninth grade or something like that showed us the Blues Brothers. And I don't think that I understood what that movie was doing. Like, I remember the destruction, especially I think because you know how it is in school when you're being shown a movie, you actually don't watch the whole movie. You watch 45 minutes of it because that's how long like a class goes. So that kind of takes you just about to the mall scene. Yeah. So I definitely remember that as kind of the big finale of my Blues Brothers experience. I don't remember ever finishing the movie.
Because you weren't interested
Well,
in
it's possible that we did finish it and I just don't remember it because it's, like if you don't get a movie, then like a 2-hour-long movie might fade into obscurity in your head. Why don't you give us a quick summary of the movie in a few sentences? What happens in this film?
So, Jake and Elwood are two brothers. Technically, they probably are not related because they grew up in an orphanage and they go and visit the penguin that has like the nun that runs the office, the orphanage, and she tells them that they need to pay $5,000 of taxes, otherwise the orphanage will close. So they have to find a way to find this $5,000 very quickly, but it has to be abiding the law by nun's request.
Because at the beginning of the movie, one of the Blues Brothers comes like gets out of jail.
Yes, so it's probably they live a borderline and non-legal life.
In fact, one of the first things they do is outrun the cops.
Yeah.
So, it's not like they have, reformed.
Yes, but they have to be clean for this mission. And they are trying to find what to do. And after like a visit to a church, Jake gets a vision from God that they should put together their Blues Brothers band and have a final concert in which
back
they
together
get
in fact
back together. Yes, and to get a final concert to raise enough money. So what happens is that they have like adventures in which they have to try to put the band members back together because they don't really want to come all of them together at first, and then they have to keep running away from the police, and then they're actually running away from other two people. One is Jake ex-fiance, and one is like a neo-Nazi of Illinois group, and then
there's a third group. There's a rival band basically that they piss off at some point.
They piss off when
Good old boys.
When they manage to get the band together, they actually steal the identity of a country band, and they
steal a gig. They basically perform instead of the band called the Good Old Boys. The Good Old Boys. They arrive. And then they chase them around.
They are the good old Blues Brothers boys. Yeah. And so these also people are chasing them, so they're constantly chased. They do the final concert, raise the money, and they all end up in jail.
Yes, and there's a lot of excessive car chase, destruction nonsense, which is like it really goes on at the end.
During the movie, 103 cars were destroyed, and this was
during filming or in the
during filming.
Okay.
There was like a world record of how many cars were destroyed during the shooting of a movie, and they got it for several years until the 2000s, in which
what beats this movie?
Like a very weird movie that I have never heard of. The Junkman destroyed 150 cars and a plane.
Okay.
I have no idea what the Junkman is.
So this was 2 years later, which is kind of quick, right?
Yes, but they still had the record, and they still destroyed 103 cars for a musical.
You know, what I absolutely hate about this movie is that it feels very disjointed. I mean, there are several instances in this movie where we just fade to black. It's like, and then there is a new scene, And it's like, it feels like either they didn't know how to connect these things or they didn't have the budget or interest in it. I mean, part of it to me seems that a lot of the connective tissue is missing because it wouldn't really lend itself to comedy. And so they were just like, we're not doing it then, like we're just going to the next situation. And I don't know if you feel that way, but to me it really feels like, and now it's the church scene, and now it's the jumping the bridge scene.
So I don't mind that. Like, I see your point now, but I'm also fine with just watching a movie that is in chapters.
Yeah. Are you into sketch comedy?
Not really.
Because it seems to me that maybe that's the origin of this, is that these are two people that did, like, Aykroyd and Belushi were the Blues Brothers before this movie came out on SNL, and it was just like a series of sketches. And so then they were like, we'll make a movie, and it's almost like they thought of kind of sketch-like ideas, and they kind of tried to weave them into a narrative, and it works here and there, but overall I think it still feels like a sort of series of sketches, and I really don't like that.
I don't really consume sketches per se. I think that I can do with a series of sketches that are supposed to be related to each other. If I wouldn't just like sit, like what it was, like 2.5 hours of
2 hours, yeah.
2 hours of sketches that are not at all related. I actually think that what you wouldn't like was that they are on a mission from God.
Well, but that's a joke.
Yeah.
It works as a joke. Yeah. If it was like sincere, if it wasn't over the top with the light beam from the sky, maybe it would bother me. But as a joke, whatever. Yeah. They say it as well as if it's not a big deal, which is funny.
Actually, they say it as if it is a big deal.
No, but they don't.
Don't worry, we're on a mission from God.
No, but they say it like everything else they do, without any like. If you were on a mission from God, you would be quite excited that you're on a mission from God. Whereas they just accept, it's a mission from God. Yeah. And they just tell everyone as if there's no further thing that needs to be said on top. It's just like, like we're on a mission from God. And that's why we're putting the band back together.
I do like that there is all these weird things that they just accept as nothing happens.
That's funny as a joke. I also think it kind of shines a light on the acting, though, because Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi are big stars at this time. I guess because they quit SNL slightly before this movie came out, not as big anymore, but still like huge names, right?
Well, John Belushi was a huge name because of Animal House.
Right.
Then I cried a bit less because he still hadn't got the Ghostbusters and stuff.
If you look at this movie, their acting is like the only thing they're doing is they're not laughing when something weird happens. Like, that's what they're accomplishing. Their acting is basically not, it's like this deadpan thing that in this era also, like with the Ghostbusters and things like these movies all had that kind of like stoic protagonist in a comedy thing going on. That does nothing for me as far, like, again, the joke is funny. Like, for example, one time, Carrie Fisher gets out a bazooka or a rocket launcher or something and just destroys the house that they're going into, and so they are covered in bricks and things, and they just kind of climb out and go like, dusting off their clothes and should we go in? Yeah, well, they go in, and it's just like this nonchalantness to the crazy things that happen to them, and that's a funny joke, but it's no accomplishment in terms of like, if this is a John Belushi vehicle, I would have guessed that John Belushi would be the person that does something in it, but he just stands there looking at things.
Yes, I do think that probably it pays off more on Saturday Night Live because they're live, so they have to accomplish laughing in that moment.
It's a bigger accomplishment.
While if they laugh and we don't know it because it could be like they made another take, so they don't laugh in there. I think it was just the first time that I see, and I thought it was. I like the surreality of it without it being too over the top surreal. It's just like I also like the fact that the two main characters are, and I think that this adds to the deadpan aspect, is that they're wearing sunglasses all the time, apart from one scene in which John Belushi takes them off. But then Aykroyd is wearing sunglasses all times, so you don't really see their eyes, but they are still not emoting, but also kind of like making you laugh. Yeah,
it's a silly thing. I think maybe Dan Aykroyd gets slightly more credit just because he also wrote the first draft of the script, even though stories are that it was horrible, which is probably
was very
again
long.
It probably ties in once again into the disjointedness, because then John Landis came in and he just fixed, was like, this is not a movie script, and just made it more coherent. But maybe, you can't polish a turd, but at least in terms of coming up with the jokes, right?
Yeah.
If your acting consists of just staying there and not reacting to anything, at least if you wrote those jokes, you get some credit for why it's funny.
Yeah.
Because John Belushi really doesn't do a lot, I feel. I know that he's I don't know, people love John Belushi, but I don't know in this movie what his accomplishment is.
I don't know either, to be fair. I really like Elwood. I think it's just it looks like a sweetheart, but it's also entrenched in this crime and blues and orphanage life, and is
should we briefly mention who else is in this movie?
Everybody's in this movie.
A lot of musical cameos and performances.
Yes.
I think
there's James Brown, there is Aretha Franklin.
I think so. Aretha Franklin, I didn't know what she looks like. And I don't listen to blues, R&B, things like that. So I will say this: when she shows up and she starts singing, it doesn't take long for you to go, that voice is so just special that you go that's Aretha Franklin, isn't
also,
it?
to be fair, her character names is Aretha.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. No, but I was just listening to it and was like, that is the voice that sings Respect, which is one of the most, again, noticeable, this is the voice that makes that song.
Yeah.
And I don't really care for the musical things. We'll talk about that in just a second as well, but that was a noticeable guest appearance, which really made that work. I mean, James Brown is great, but James Brown is a goofy guy.
But I do think that my favorite one is Ray Charles.
Ray Charles, who sells the Blues Brothers their instruments.
Yes.
And kind of extorts them because I guess they're pawning off their old instruments and then they want them back. But I mean, that's how a pawn shop works. So.
But it sings Shake Your Tail Feather, and it's just my favorite song.
Yeah. Carrie Fisher, who at the time I guess was with Dan Aykroyd.
They actually got engaged during the movie, but then she went back to Paul Simon, so they never really got married.
She banged all the famous people.
She was also having a cocaine problem at the time.
Yeah, well, everybody in this movie was doing cocaine.
Actually, a fun fact of the day, a part of the budget was for cocaine.
Yes, it's well known as well.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's still a fun fact. I mean, the unfortunate part is that during filming of this movie, there was kind of an intervention on John Belushi, and he said, something like, "I might die from this habit."
And he died 2 years later.
It happened, so.
To be fair, it's one thing that it's not that I like this movie or any other movie in this period or any other musicians in this period because of the drugs. I know that a lot of people romanticize a little bit the use of drugs in artists. I'm very against the use of drugs if they're not prescribed to you by a medical doctor.
I think it's interesting because you do feel inspired when you're under the influence of certain substances. But I'm always wondering because, for example, when I'm drunk, sometimes I have ideas that I think are brilliant. And obviously then later you learn that they're not.
So do you think that this movie was kind of like that?
Well, actually not talking about this movie. I'm talking in general. Yeah. I think maybe inspiration is not the right word. Maybe we are just more willing to actually attempt something. It's more of a lowering your inhibitions and your insecurities about something. Doing a crazy thing because you're on cocaine doesn't, the fact that you're on cocaine doesn't actually contribute to whether or not the crazy thing is funny. So maybe you just wouldn't have done the crazy thing because you have inhibitions to do them. So you do funny things because of cocaine, but it's more about not being able to allow yourself to be that crazy. But maybe the crazy version of you is funny. Someone who professionally like write screenplays, for example, shouldn't require, chemical help with that. Then you're not good at writing screenplays, is what I think. I'm not saying that anything that was written under the influence isn't good. I'm just saying you as a professional have a problem if that's how you manage to do good work.
I do think I will never really try drugs, to be fair, but...
You take so many prescription meds, though.
Yes, I do take prescription meds that are used as recreational drugs for other people. But as just recreationally, I don't think I will ever take drugs. But for example, I like when I listen to songs, for example, from the Beatles, that like some drugs like acid seems that they expand the realm of your perception, and this could be interesting. But cocaine, I don't know. I absolutely hate the scene in which they go to the restaurant because the trumpeter now is a maître, and they just make...
Right, so they seek out all of their band members, and one of them works at a restaurant now.
Yeah.
And so they go to that restaurant.
And it's a fancy French restaurant, and they go on a table, and they sit, and they are the worst customer ever. But what I don't like is that they make awful sounds.
They also try to buy some of the guests.
Yeah, but that's not so aggressive to me as the sounds, and so it's like
they slurp and things.
Yes, that's I have to avert my ears.
Okay, I think that scene, like many scenes in this movie, is just too long in general. Maybe they have too much confidence in their jokes. Like they're not as funny as like for example. In the mall, they drive around the mall and they just destroy everything. But
and comment on
their conversation in the car is, oh look, they have a Toys R Us over there, and
they really have everything here.
Yeah, that they do that, but they do it for 3 minutes or 4 minutes or something. It's like we got the joke the first time, and now it's just kind of gratuitous.
I think that this is the same point that you made on Night of the Museums, that sometimes it seems that they are trying stuff and they get a bit too long.
Although this didn't feel as much like it was improvised. Like they just did the same joke over and over.
Yeah.
Like they just said, oh, and now it has a Nike store or whatever they say, it's... or maybe I didn't get what the progression of the joke was. That's the other possibility. Maybe I just didn't get it, right? But it felt to me like they just kept saying, these guys that are driving through a mall and destroying it are casually commenting on the stores in the mall.
Yes.
And that's the joke 5 times in a row.
Yeah, I think that it should get more and more impressive because, at a certain point they should lose their calm. They should start and they never do. So it's probably the repetition is to say, hey, they never get out of these
and it's the whole movie is saying that. So, it ties in, but we don't need it. It's gratuitous. It's excessive. And it is deliberately excessive. So that's part of kind of the stylistic choices in the movie. Like the fact that the whole building collapses onto them, or the fact that there isn't just 4 police cars, but 700. But in some instances, it feels pointless and just extending the runtime of the movie.
Yeah, but it is also nice because there is all this distraction, but actually only 2 people die. The 2 neo-Nazis. They are the only people that die, but there are so many distraction, and everybody always survives.
So what do you absolutely love about this movie then?
I like the music and just the style of everybody. They look so cool. The band members with the big hair and the big beards and the big mustaches and the flared pants. And
this is just because it's 70s adjacent.
Yeah, it's just the atmosphere.
Yeah,
I like it.
I like the cars. They're very sort of there's a lot of kind of, I don't know anything about cars, but as a kid, I had little toy cars, and I liked those kind of 80s police cars that are a little bit they look like muscle cars,
The second joke of the movie is the fact that when Jake comes out of prison, Elwood comes to to pick him up in a police car, because apparently they had a Cadillac, but he exchanged it for a microphone,
Yeah.
and then he bought this car at a police auction, and it's supposed to be like super like good car, and we see that actually, like, I don't know why the Chicago police chose to replace their cars, because the Bluesmobile survived while all the other police cars got wrecked in the meanwhile.
I actually always thought that the Blues Brothers themselves, it looks cheap. Like their shirts and all that, like it looks like it. I mean, it would tie into like kind of where they come from, that they are not wearing expensive suits or anything, but it makes it look much less cool, because then it's just a guy with sunglasses. But
It really looks like they should wash their shirts.
Yeah. And then you really like the music, which is a big part of this movie.
Yeah.
I think all the songs are cool. I don't remember any of them. But it's the classic thing. I just don't enjoy musicals. At least this is a movie about a band, so it makes sense that sometimes they are singing songs. Not always, like the Aretha Franklin one.
Yes, that's the most musical ones.
It just goes like, here's an argument that plays out in song. But that's such a good performance.
Yeah.
You actually see Aretha Franklin perform. So
but I do think that this is the only one in which a character just starts singing out of the blue without a reason.
The James Brown one at the beginning, I thought went on for too long as well. But
I just love watching the people jumping around and waving their church.
I think so did the filmmakers, and that's why all you see is just people jumping way too high, and that's kind of the joke.
Yeah.
Like people are like on trampolines or something.
Yes, they're definitely on trampolines.
And it's silly, but I was getting bored during that. I remember specifically thinking, ugh, how much longer is this song?
No, and I have these, since I watched that movie, I would like to go to a gospel church in the US one time just to see like how it is in real life.
They're not going to have James Brown.
Yeah, they're not going to have trampolines or everything, but it just feels so, like I come from like a Catholic background. It feels weird to me that people are like just happy praising the Lord and not
you have to be
guilty.
a little bit sad in Catholicism.
Yes.
What I absolutely love about this movie is it's not quite the cinematography, although I think the cinematography is quite good in this movie. Like a lot of kind of, I mean, when at the beginning of the film we see him come out of prison and there's this crazy light behind John Belushi, and it's like an accent, a visual accent. So what I really like is some of the visual gags in this movie. The one that I particularly like is when the good old boys chase down the Blues Brothers band. The good old boys are in an RV, and it's a whole band, right? So it's like a bunch of people, and you see the RV from the front. And this is very difficult to explain because it's a visual gag. But basically, you can see in the top row where presumably the bed bunks are, there's a big strip of window, and there's just 4 faces looking out, and it looks really silly.
Yeah.
And what I like about that, and there's a few things like that, that it ties into the deadpan attitude of the movie, is no one points out, like there's no explanation for why that's there, or no one comments on it. It's just one shot. It's funny. It's never seen again, and you don't need to. It's just like a funny joke. It takes exactly as much time as it needs to make that joke, and then it's gone. And I love that.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I don't like on movies usually is that you get the joke and you have fun, and then they do a reprising, which so that everybody could get the joke just to be sure, and they kind of spoil it.
This is actually in stand-up comedy a big problem, I feel. People straight up, it's called like top up, the idea that you make people laugh and then you say another thing that makes them laugh, even like so that the laughter doesn't stop. This is like fucking theory of stand-up comedy, but whatever. So top-up jokes often are literally just the comedian saying the same joke in other words again.
Yeah, and it feels like I was smart enough to get the first time.
It's getting annoying now.
Now you're just telling me that I'm stupid, so you have to like dumb it down for me.
Yeah.
And so I like that it doesn't happen.
And maybe we can talk about some of our favorite gags in the movie in general.
Yeah.
Another one that is very similar to that is when... So there are these Nazis in the movie, and at the end of the movie, they fall from a very great height in their car, And you imagine, well, maybe the car lands on the concrete and it explodes or something. But what instead happens is it falls through the concrete. So the car makes a car-shaped hole into the pavement. And again, that's all we see of that. It's just a funny thing that is unexpected. And the unexpected is important for a joke, I think.
Yeah.
And then that's over. That's how the Nazis are dealt with, you know. And it's a visual thing. It's difficult to convey on a podcast. But if you've seen the movie, I think you know that that's very funny.
I also do think that it's just funny because it seems that they were shooting the movie and it's like when you were making a soup and it's like, let's add this thing as well. We have it. Let's put it in here. It's like, let's add some Nazis now. Let's put them. Let's see what happens.
It definitely felt like kind of a what the fuck. Like now there are Nazis.
Yeah. I think that I have three things, three gags.
Me too. Nice.
That I like. My one is when they are playing the country songs. To be fair, I am more of a fan of country music than blues music, and I do like that.
So just to set up the scene, this is the bar scene.
Yes.
And the bar is kind of a redneck bar.
Yeah.
And they obviously are a blues band.
Yes.
And so it's a little like they're like throwing beers and shit at them for the entire time.
Yeah.
And so they were like, well, what kind of country music can we do? And so they decide to do the TV theme of Rawhide. Like it's just the theme from a TV show. It's like such a weird thing, but it's funny.
Yes.
Anyway.
But what I like about it is that they go there and they see that there is chicken wire to between the stage and the audience.
Yeah.
And you just see the rednecks when they start playing blues, just throwing angrily bottles at it, and then they start playing Rawhide.
Yeah.
Okay, and the rednecks were happy, and they keep throwing.
The joke is that it never stops.
Yes.
They're just. Even when they're kind of between songs and they're like talking to each other, there's still one or two beers being thrown.
I just like that it's like chicken wire, and you just set up that you just mentioned that there is chicken wire, and then you just keep singing for all the scene in the redneck bar. Like,
and again, it's unacknowledged, really, that they're being like bombarded with an ungodly amount of things. Like it's like there should be like an entire room full of glasses. That are just for throwing.
And actually, the owner of the bar, then I see the amounts of beer that have been thrown, and he's all happy about, look at how many things they've thrown at the stage.
Yeah, that's a good
But
joke.
it's just like a very glimpse of a scene of him being happy.
Right. Give me another one of your favorite gags.
I like the relationship with Will Elwood and Toast.
Okay.
I think that this is a very endearing character, and you see it through the movie because when you just see that he's making himself toast in his like tiny sad apartment in Chicago. And,
that has a constant train going past.
Yeah, and he's just there flipping his toast, and then everywhere he goes, he just wants toast.
Yeah.
It's plain white toast, and I'm a fan of plain things, and especially had many toast spaces in my life, and I just thought that it's just like a nice character detail.
Well, at least he has some characteristics.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult to characterize someone who has no emotions. Well, my third favorite visual gag is, it's got to be obvious, but at the end of the movie, the Bluesmobile falls apart, and it's an incredible effect.
Yeah.
It's actually an engineering marvel. Like, it looks so good.
Yeah, it's like all the car just breaks down at the same time.
In 1 second.
Yeah.
It just go bump and it falls into thousands of little pieces. Yeah. It's so good. And it's not, nowadays that would be a CGI thing and it would turn into sand or something. Like, it would be so unimpressive. And this is also from like a filmmaking perspective. It's like just like something really valuable to see. Like, they had that car, they had this existing thing, and they had to find a way to make it look like that. And again, it's a visual thing. On the podcast, difficult to explain. So I really recommend, look up, I'm sure you can Google Bluesmobile falling apart or something, and you'll find this incredible effect. It's really good.
Another thing that I like is all the chases.
All the chases?
Yes.
Like half the movie.
Yes, I do think that when I watched this movie and then I commented on it, I was like, Yeah, not only I like the music and the style, but I just like seeing chases and car gets distracted.
This is not how most car chases looked like, even in the 80s.
Yeah, probably.
This is like deliberately absurd, right?
Goofy car chases.
Yeah.
But I do like the distraction.
But also, like, there's all these stretches of the chases where it's not really goofy. Like, what's absurd is that, like, there's just more and more police cars.
Yes.
I mean, what I really also like is at the end,
Hot,
when
hot,
all
hot,
the
hot, hot,
the
hot,
military
hot.
shows up, and there's this one special forces group that are like football players, and they just like, with every step they go hut 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 hut, and then at some point we cut to just one lone guy like abseiling on the side of a building, and he goes hut. It's just that's
Like
hilarious.
so many
Outrageously
people
funny.
are against these two guys.
Yeah. And the absurdity of that is funny, but it also takes a little bit away from like the grittiness of a car chase. We can always go back to episode 1 of the Cringy Movie Collection podcast and talk about a car chase in Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know, like that's a very different vibe of a car chase, and that's around the same time.
But it's also nice because it kicks people out of the car.
Right, but what I'm saying is
Still goofy.
these two things are very different from
Yeah.
each other, right? So, but I mean, they have their own merits, but this is more deliberately like an absurd version of it.
Yeah, but I do think that to enjoy a car chase, I need to have the right soundtrack
Yeah.
under it.
Blues,
It's like dun dun
rhythm
dun
and
dun
blues.
dun dun dun. It's
Okay.
a good soundtrack. Oh yes, there are other things that are like so nice about the movie. It's like when Jack and Elwood have to sneak in the theater because there are all the police looking for them, and the music is already playing, and while they're sneaking in, they're doing it
Yes,
on rhythm.
there's a rhythmic sneaking, even though
Yes.
there isn't really, like there's a police guy
Yeah.
and they're sneaking behind him, and it doesn't
Just-
feel like the rhythm helps at all.
No.
It's just that's what the Blues Brothers do.
Yes, exactly. And when they have to promote the concert and they steal the big megaphone and they just go
They
in
drive
the
through like a
meadow.
wood or something,
Yes.
yeah. Like they just
In the
blast
forest.
the information about
Yeah.
the concert to no one.
Yeah.
And again, what's good about that is there's never any like reference to it. There's no
Yeah.
mention to it. It just sometimes it cuts to them being in a field, and that's
Yes.
it. Like it's not like, and then they go like, oh, we should probably also go to the city to actually,
Yeah.
increase our numbers
Yes,
or like whatever.
nobody comments on
Yeah.
it. You can just get it, enjoy it, and move on with your life and your movie.
It does feel like this is the kind of movie that people had great fun making, not just because of the cocaine. Right? Like a lot of these jokes.
Apparently, they didn't have so much fun making because John Belushi was getting into trouble and everything.
Well, they had
and-
trouble actually
Yeah.
making the movie
Yeah.
because they were having too much fun, right? But like, what I mean is, a lot of these jokes are understated, and it seems like the person that makes this just thinks it's really funny, and that's why they're doing it. It's not because this is a mainstream appeal kind of thing.
Yes, I was really thinking about why do I like this movie, and because I'm not a fan of Saturday Night Live. I've never seen an episode of Saturday Night Live.
Okay.
And not a fan of improvisation comedy, and I just think that it's the music and the atmosphere and everything. And
And I will say, this movie doesn't feel that improvised. I mean, I don't really know these actors that well, but it doesn't feel like a lot of it seems like the extension of a scripted joke.
Yeah, because I think that they are destroying so many things that they don't have room for improvisation.
You can't redo it that much.
Yeah. But it's just you just sit there and for 2 hours you live in this weird world.
Right, this movie, I don't know, the budget was like around 30 million, some of which went to cocaine, and then it made like 100 million. So it was quite successful, but you wouldn't really think that if you heard like what happened before the movie was released. And it's a weird racist thing.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this?
Yeah, it was considered like a black movie because it was
Because
about
the music.
blues.
Right. So someone at, I guess, Universal was like, we don't want to show this movie in like white neighborhood cinemas.
But also like the cinemas didn't want it.
Right. But the argument was because white people wouldn't want to see the movie, it would draw black people to white neighborhoods. so we don't want to show it in white neighborhoods. That's insane.
Oh my gosh.
Like, we don't want the black people there. That
I
would cause
thought that
trouble.
they just didn't want to show like a black people movie. It's like, oh, nobody would gonna come anyway,
That
and
makes
I'm
sense.
against it.
It makes sense, but like, I mean, I've read this somewhere, so
Yeah.
who knows if it's true, right? But like, the idea is, I don't remember the name of the guy,
Yeah.
but I think it was like someone at the studio, so not someone directly
Yeah.
involved in the production, who was just saying like, look, we're not showing, like, we're only showing it basically to black neighborhood cinemas, and with that reduced run, it was still wildly successful, which I think is a big accomplishment.
And also, it's like it's weird because it is black people music. I don't even know if you are allowed to say it anymore. Like, it's just it
Urban.
is like urban music. And what I always thought it was weird is that only one person in the Blues Brothers band is black.
Yeah.
Not two people.
Yeah, well, so the
drummer
guy who's kind
and
of,
the guitarist.
they have like a father figure in their life. It's Cap Calloway, right?
Yeah.
And Cap Calloway is a black guy.
Yeah.
So I think the implication is that the Blues Brothers, because they kind of grew up with this figure in their life, that's why there's kind of in this kind of culture that is not predominantly white culture at all. And I think it's kind of endearing, the idea that you know, it's just like nurture, you know, like this is where they come from, and we accept that is who they are, and we don't have to kind of explore that, because then it would, like, if you did that today, I think there might be a lot of canceling going on and a lot of issues with it, you know, like this appropriation of white people doing, you know, like, there's actually an explanation in the movie for why they are the Blues Brothers, even though they're white.
Yes.
But it's not important. That's not the point of the movie. And I like that. I think not everything needs to be politicized to the point of,
Yes.
you know, and
It's
like, this is a silly
but then
comedy
in the
thing.
big band, only two people are black and the other people are white. While when they go around the street, everybody that they
All
meet
the guests,
and interact
musicians are
with
black as well.
Are black, yeah.
And maybe that's one of the reasons why they're there, to kind of legitimize a little bit this appropriation. But again, I think that's too political to think about. I have a little thing, a little fun, like, did you know?
I also have it, did you know?
Okay, so we can try and collect some points now.
Yes.
We haven't really consistently been doing this, but I think it's fun to try and surprise the other person with a little did you know.
And I failed last time, so...
So, you want to start?
So did you know, we mentioned that Dan Aykroyd and Carrie Fisher got engaged during the movie. They also met during the movie, and their meet-cute was she was choking on a Brussels sprouts, and he gave her the Heimlich maneuver.
That is very sexy. I did not know that. That's an excellent fun fact. Did you know that the name the Blues Brothers was the idea of Howard Shore, who composed the soundtrack for The Lord of the Rings later? Because Howard Shore, at the time, at SNL, was like head of music or something like that. So he was the band that the Blues Brothers performed with, at least sometimes, I guess. And so the background is that Howard Shore just said, like, why don't you, call yourselves the Blues Brothers? And it's a weird connection between this movie and Lord of the Rings.
No, I didn't know that.
So we get points.
Oh, bonus points.
Yay.
If you have any other fun facts, please drop them in the comments. And since you're dropping things in the comment, just click the button, the like button, and then subscribe to our channel. And next time, we're gonna be back with
A movie.
another movie.
It's called, I'm going to have to look at my notes, because this is kind of an obscure movie, I think. It's called Lego, The Adventures of Clutch Powers from 2010.
It's gonna be very yellow.
Yeah, it's an animated movie with, Yvonne Strahovski and Ryan McPartlin, who are actors on Chuck, which is...
Why
all
did
I
you
can
get
say
this movie?
No, but we'll talk about that in the next episode.
Okay, thank you for being with us.
Being with us.
Yes,
We have a relationship.
thank you for listening.
Parasocial relationship.
Thank you for listening to us. And yes, parasocial relationships are important to strengthen online communities. So please be with us.
Goodbye.
Bye.